Seems fair to me.
Yes, it did.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Hey, thanks for joining us in Go Blues. It's another edition of Donnybrook. Great to have you with us, and good to see that everybody's around the big green table, starting with Sarah Fenske, the editor-in-chief of the Reiverfront Times. Along with one of our founders, he's Mr. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Along with columnist from the Reiverfront Times and the host on the Big 550 with Jumpin' Jay Kanzler, he's Ray Hartman. Weeknights 9 to 11, right, Ray? All right, we got to tune in. And from the St. Louis American, STLmag.com and beyond, the one and only Alvin Reed. And wow, big story this week, Sarah Fenske, when Better Together, the 501c3, which wanted to merge St. Louis City and St. Louis County to form one big 1.3 million person city, decided to fold up operations and withdraw its proposal. There will be no statewide vote next year. Who knows what's going to happen? I guess people are wondering what exactly was the reason for this. Some people, including the mayor, said it was Steve Stenger. When he was found guilty last week, he was a big leader, and the organization decided to fold a tent. What do you think?
Well, I think the Stenger factor, it can't be underestimated here. I think it gave cover to a lot of people who wanted to be against this. They were able to say, hey, look at the timing of this. You know, we've got this big problem here in St. Louis County. And look at the judgment of the people who are running this, that they thought a good move would be to put Steve Stenger in charge of this combined entity, to extend his term, make him mayor of the Muni Gov going forward. And now we find out that he's doing pay to play, and now he's a felon. And it was a very easy way for people who might not have been bold enough to speak out against it. It gave them their greatest talking point. And that had to have hurt.
I actually have a different view of that. I think it was because they realized that organic opposition to Missouri around the state, which is very much open to sort of a don't tread on me. I think we said you're next. But it wasn't so much that people around the state thought they were going to be forced into a merger, but there's a don't tread on me part of Missouri. Dean Plocker, a Republican who I think was a hero in this, had a bill that passed overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives and going to the Senate that was going to require local approval of these kind of things. I think Stenger, the only value Stenger had to them was when they advertised outstate, they could say the mayor's for this, the daily newspaper's for it, the county executive's for it. I don't think he was the reason.
I kind of disagree with both of you. I think they underestimated that people in St. Louis County were really willing to fight, and that there was always this thought that it doesn't matter what they say, some people, they'll roll sooner or later. They'll see the light, or they'll see the money, or they'll see something. But there was a day one spat. You know, Dean Plutcher from Des Peres, okay? I think that's where the roots were. They stood up. Des Peres, you know, city council was the first one of the first ones to get called out by this gentleman, and we're going to sue everybody. Chesterfield, immediately, as crazy as that talk was, seceding and every council meeting, they were passing some kind of non-binding statute. It was a real fight. It was a real spat. And like you said, a lot of bad judgment from Better Together, and one of them was that these people are serious. And I don't think I've railed as hard on anything on this show as I have against that, because it just couldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. And I think they really underestimated the will of the people of St. Louis County. That's who won when this thing went away.
Well, I'm nostalgic for it already. I thought it was the greatest story that's ever come our way. When you have the mayor and the county executive both saying, well, our constituents are nice, but they're not that bright. We really need out-county wisdom. I thought, I've never seen anything like this. And I thought the way they turned on Stenger, who one minute he was their star and their hero, and the next minute was Steve who?
Okay, well,
I thought it was all wonderful.
Not only Stenger and Light, our good friends at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch editorial page said that outstate voters would weigh in better. I think I'm closer to Ray. I think that I don't think you needed the county, and I think
You
that the
didn't.
backers here, including probably members of Civic Progress and Mark Reitner, whomever, probably took a look at some polls, and they probably found that there was no support for it, even outside of St. Louis.
St. Louis County was against it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, literally the only people that were willing to speak in favor of this thing at a certain point were the people being paid for it. You could not find anybody
That's
else
so true.
willing to say a good
You're
thing.
right, but St. Louis County was against it 3-1, and all they needed, if they didn't have this organic opposition from the Sheriff's Association, all the others,
Okay,
all they
that's
needed
true.
was 10 points.
Okay, now let me
outstate.
ask you this, guys. What is going to happen now? I mean, will we merge police departments? Will we merge the health department? Will we merge the courts? Will anything happen between the city and the county in the future,
Can
Bill?
I say the first thing that should happen? There should be some retribution. That's what there should be.
Well,
Will Ross,
U.S. Grant.
this the young lady from Boeing who all of a sudden saw the light and the community was not represented. Now they sat in this cabal and came up with this nonsense, okay? And then when it all blew apart, I see these black leaders talking about, oh well, the people weren't represented. What? They need to be sat down and held to task. What were you talking about? What were you thinking? The gentleman at the NAACP, he got busted straight out. I'm not ready to let it go yet.
Wait a minute, Alvin, did you see, I agree with you, but did you see John Gaskin got just endorsed by the local NAACP is standing up for him against the national?
Well, really?
Yes.
But what does that
They
tell
just
you?
didn't.
What does
No,
that
I'm
tell
not
you about
arguing with you. I say you're right. But
Well, let me ask you this.
Can I say something?
Do we need 2 police academies and 2 fire academies
No.
still?
Okay.
I think what should happen here, and I think what there might be a movement to make happen here, is to have the city of St. Louis re-enter St. Louis County as one of the municipalities within it. So it gets to keep its own governments as far as being a city, the way Kirkwood is a city, but it gets rid of some of those duplicative county functions. And there are now some city leaders who went on the record saying, we don't like this Better Together plan, but we should look at this. If people could just hold them to what they said about being in favor of that, that could force them to maybe start taking that idea seriously.
I've been saying it about 3 decades, and I did a lot of speaking in the early days of the RFT, and it's one of the examples I would give. And I don't think good thing I wasn't running for office because I never found an audience that liked the idea. And it was, but I think that I think I said this before. One of the possible benefits of Better Together, besides Bill won the argument in the first round, is that it, I think, moved the needle. I think a freeholders process, like they were talking about, might actually
Did it move the needle?
No, well, let me finish. And I think the idea of doing a freeholders process might make sense. And at the very minimum, you got to remember, in this debate, the police departments, for example, already collaborate on Regis, on a major case squad, on 911. There ought to be a mentality, at least. Let's look at the health departments. Let's look at things where there can be some commonality. I agree with you. I'd like to see the city.
But the only thing, guys, you guys are Democrats largely, and Republicans would really be marginalized if 300,000 Democrats enter the county. I mean, it's politics, but that would happen.
It's already blue. I don't think.
Well, no, actually, right now the county council is going to be
that's true.
Republican
but
majority.
They can't even field a candidate for executive that has a chance. It's only in certain districts that Republicans have a say.
Right.
And it's now the Board of Aldermen
didn't run
is,
anybody, really.
thank goodness, going to drop down to 14.
Right.
Maybe.
You know, maybe. Yeah, if that
We'll
goes
see.
through.
Yeah.
And so thus, you're not carrying 28 aldermen into a process that would involve the city coming back. I know that'd be separate entities, just like we have a city council and other ones have them in their own municipalities. I think that helps a little bit if the city moving into part of the county. I mean, if you had to do something, then I would I'm gonna say favor that. Maybe I could be convinced.
Except all the county offices in the city are then abolished. Right. I mean, you'd have a lot of people against it just on that. You
They
have
lose
more
jobs.
circuit
We tried
attorneys.
that. Okay, Alvin Reed, I want to ask you about a major story that's going to take place tomorrow at 3:30 when the former head of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, also the head of the St. Louis County Port Authority, and according to the indictment of Steve Stenger, the woman who abetted a lot of the corruption in St. Louis County by directing contracts and grants to donors of the county executive, Sheila Sweeney will plead guilty tomorrow in the courtroom of Judge Catherine Perry. And also tomorrow at about noon or so, we understand from published reports and the announcement from the Eagleton Courthouse that John Rollo, the man who headed up Cardinal Creative and who got some of these contracts in exchange for doing nothing, except for donating to the county executive. He's going to be indicted. So what do you make of these apples? And if, well, Sweeney's going to plead guilty, apparently, do you think she should spend time in the Gray Bar Motel?
Well, you know, like I guess over the last 10 days, I've received countless texts and emails that I'm just, dude, you're overjoyed. First stinger, then better together. And I don't take pleasure in anybody going to prison, all right? That being said, send her to prison. I think she deserves to do jail time. I think she's was a bag person for a corrupt public official. She knew what was going on. She could have walked away from her job at any moment. And how many judges have sentenced people where, you know, you were a party to the crime and it was not like literally you were forced into doing it. Now, whether it was for your job, your salary, your status, there was some reason where you just didn't walk away and said, I'm not having anything to do with this. That was a decision she made, and I think she should have to spend a little bit of time in jail.
Yeah, I'm tired of white-collar criminals always getting a break. And I don't think that she should spend a lot of time in prison, but I think she should have to spend some time.
I have a hard time defending Sheila Sweeney because she clearly has been a very bad actor in this whole thing. But I think as a society in general, we lock too many people up in prison. And I'm not just saying, oh, let Sheila off because she's this white-collar person. But I think we really ought to start looking at this issue and say, do we really need all these people in prison? And if somebody's not likely to be out there, say, molesting another child, is society really served by having them behind bars?
You're too reasonable, Sarah.
I think one of the things is, you know, we always get to be these amateur judges. You've got to, what they'll look at, they do have guidelines. Sure. We don't really know what the sentencing range is, which is where they start, and then they give her credit for pleading guilty, which is a big part of it. And if she, you know, if she wants,
she has cooperated.
If she's, and we don't know what cooperation she gave with regard to Stenger. We don't. She may give none, or she may.
Gave.
Well, if she gave cooperation to getting somebody bigger, and she's a first offender, and she pleads guilty, I don't think she should be treated differently than anybody else with that description.
Okay.
And I'm guessing she won't do time because of it, but I could be wrong.
You could ask yourself. In fact, Sarah and I met with former County Executive Gene McNary this week on the KMWX radio program, and he suggested that there should be some sort of facility in North St. Louis, his specificity there, and there should be white-collar criminals who have skills, whether they're dentists or accountants or doctors, and they should, for the duration of their sentence, be working with the community.
That's a good idea.
And giving back and helping, where they wouldn't be doing anything if they're, you know, behind bars chopping rocks.
Well, okay, but there is such thing as punishment, all right? And I don't see that as punishment. Now, that might be helping this part of the community, and I'm sorry. Nobody is going out of their way to help people the way they would be for a former county executive and a former white-collar. I've been a hotty-totty my whole life. I think this is Gene McNary feeling sorry for folks, okay? I'm sorry. I just do not feel sorry for them.
Me either. This is a betrayal of the public trust in a big way. And I think to say that, well, we're going to have you working on the north side as an accountant or something, is too minimal.
I don't know about the north side, but I want to say the words, Gene McNary had a good idea, because I haven't said that in a minute. And when we started the show, he was county executive, and I never said that ever. So Gene McNary had a good idea.
He's a good guy. I like Gene McNary.
He is a good guy, actually. Yeah. And it's so ironic that he and Shamel had the feud in the 80s that arguably, when we were starting out, that had a lot to do with not to relitigate it, but that had a lot to do with Bidwell moving to Arizona, and it ended up that both Gene McNary and Vince Shamel have been advocates for some form of reunification, which is kind of ironic.
Isn't that something? Yeah. Hey, Sarah, I want to ask you about, speaking of unification or lack thereof, Lewis Reed, president of the Board of Aldermen, who, as we just found out, apparently hired John Rello and Cardinal Creative for $15,000 or so for a re-election campaign. Which is kind of curious because Rollo's an insurance guy and didn't do that work, so we'll have to look into that.
You wonder.
But he says that because of all the shenanigans and the felonies with the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, which is a partnership between the city and the county, the city should pull out and should no longer develop economically or plan to with the county. Do you agree with him?
So I hate to say this, but I actually do agree with Lewis Reed on this point. Overall, I do have a lot of criticism for Lewis Reed, but in this case, I'm not saying they should pull out, but the city needs to have a talking to about how this thing is structured, because it has now come out, thanks to Stenger's problems, that, the county had 11 of 15 seats on this board, and Stenger was giving his people marching orders to basically ignore the city as far as economic development went. I mean, this is the most shocking thing. This is St. Louis, the city that the county is even named after. The central city in this, they were told to do nothing to help it. And because the staff was taking all their marching orders from this corrupt county executive, the city was completely getting the shaft. Our tax dollars were paying into this thing that was being used to move people to these fancy suburbs like Kirkwood. So I'm not saying we should pull out, but we need to have a come to Jesus moment where we figure out how to make sure that does not happen again.
Well, I think
the worst part of it is the city didn't seem to realize it was happening.
Right. How does that happen?
I mean,
yeah.
how can you have the city not realizing they're not getting any of this?
Right.
I mean, they had 4 people on the commission.
And so classic of Lewis Reed to call for this
right
now,
too.
But I mean, he should have been on this before this, but now we know it. What are we going to do about it?
Well, I think he's wrong in calling for the city to pull out of it, if that's what he's doing. And I realize I won't be writing a column about this, but I do think that he's wrong about that, but I don't understand why there should be this imbalance. I mean, they definitely have to blow up the existing partnership. But this is a good example of the kind of stuff we need to do. Meaning, there's no reason we have we do it on tourism with Explore St. Louis, with the ZMD, with MSD. We have examples where the city and county work together. And economic development is one that should happen.
I agree with Ray.
But I don't think it should be 11-4. But blowing it up and not having it exist
all
doesn't make
15
sense.
need to go. They need to clean house. I mean, 12 or 11-4, whatever. However many people have a seat on that need to go, and nobody can be.
Alvin wants to get even.
I think everybody.
No, they have got a new guy in charge.
For a new panel here.
Sheila Sweeney's been replaced by Rodney Krim, and I think he's a stand-up guy and decent. Right. I do wonder why the Carpenters Union actually has 2 of the 12 members. They've got Al Bond and Shannon Weber, both of the Carpenters Union. One union has 2 people on the partnership.
Charlie, I want to endorse what Alvin said. I would agree with Alvin, although I say I'm ready. He's going to be talking about us going, but he's in a fired mood. I don't know what he did. But I will say that I agree. If you were on the board of that partnership, everybody ought to say, let's get. First of all, I don't think it should be that imbalance. Maybe it should be 7-7, and the county gets a tie-breaking vote or something. No, why not?
Because the county's 3 times as large.
All right, whatever. But the point is, it should be tighter than that.
Well, you know
but
what
all
happened?
15 people, and I don't even know who they are, all of them ought to say, we'll step away and let somebody else do it.
Here's what happened. The Port Authority, which is where all that money was, it was the bag of cash was with the Port Authority, which got its money from the Lime Casino. And it was not reporting as required by law to the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. It was supposed to report at least monthly or quarterly, and it never did. And remember, that's when the county council decided to withhold all funding for the Port Authority until it came up with the reports.
But you got to say, remember, we are on pace to have one distinction in the country, which is of all the cities that don't have like an ocean, that have the most port authorities. I mean, we're up to like, what, 4 or 5?
Hey.
I don't know how many port authorities we have.
So, okay, now there's another development this week, and that is that Hazel Irby, a member of the St. Louis County Council, Ray, has quit her job where she made $20,000. Now she'll be making $121,000 a year in a cabinet position for Sam Page. Another news story this week. He's the new county executive. Right. So, what do you think about Sam Page hiring Hazel Irby?
I'm fine with it. I will say that I was a bit critical of not critical of him, but I'm critical of this idea that Sam Page, while he obviously, is an improvement in terms of ethics over the last guy, that should not be the standard by which his success is made. And the Post-Dispatch, Jeremy Kohler, who's normally a really fine investigative reporter, did a piece this past Sunday that was just unbelievable in trying to create a Sam Page that doesn't exist, meaning there's some kind of post-political thing here. The fact is, Sam Page is a politician. It was a smart move. It's interesting in that it gives briefly control of the county council to the Republicans. But at the local level, there's not that much difference.
I think it's an awful thing, Ray. I think that this is just such a blatant political thing, that Sam Page, who wants to get elected, So he's taking his biggest critic, Hazel Irby, and giving her $120,000 a year of public money so that she'll be on his side. I mean, I just don't see anything good in that.
Well, I say it was good, and it proves my point that this is not some post-political world we're
Well,
living
but I
in.
mean, you said you didn't have a problem with Hazel getting the job.
I mean, I think having a diversity officer in the county is a good thing. I think she's
capable,
and she's capable.
But
and I think, and by the way, the
$121,000
$121,000 is not that outrageous.
Well, but in 3 years she gets the bigger pension. That's the key too. She gets a bigger pension after 3 years.
Good for her.
Well, that's why. Look,
I don't care.
Steve Stenger put Pat Dolan on the county payroll. He put Lou Abusi from Congressman Clay's office on the payroll. He put John Cross, is that his name, on the payroll for $60,000. How is this much different? How is what Sam Page?
Well, I think
is doing any different?
I think for one, if one has a past and now headed to prison for his, illegal behavior, I think the motive which behind it. Now, there could be political, like I say, but she stepped down. He didn't say, hey, quit and I'll give you this job, unless we don't know that.
Well,
and
you think it's a coincidence?
I do,
Alvin?
and I also think y'all just kind of, y'all player hating.
Wait a minute, I'm saying
look,
Mr. Better
let's
together.
get off, Mr. Page, right. He put his foot down on corruption and
Dr. Page.
Dr. Page, right.
Come on, 2 weeks ago, everybody was in an uproar because Hazel had a lot of supporters at that meeting, and they weren't even allowed to speak, and he just mowed them down, and people were saying things like, see you in court, and now all of a sudden, all the opposition has vanished.
Right.
Well, no,
Smooth sailing for Dr. Page.
It's an interesting point, and the interesting thing about it is I said and believe that she was totally disrespected by him in that process. They had the votes, they didn't follow the ordinance they should have followed. But the interesting thing about the whole thing with Hazel is that Sam Page is again just demonstrating that the idea that having he was a close friend of hers, supposedly on the council. If that had been Stenger doing it before, not excusing him, we'd have been people would have been going nuts.
No, that sounds like you're excusing him.
I'm not excusing him.
It
is.
just
If it had been
sounds
Charlie, they would have done it.
No, that's the whole thing. It's like back with, you brought Charlie up. Now remember when Charlie was evil and corrupt and all that? I said, what if Charlie Dooley was doing all this?
If he had done that, they'd have screamed.
Stenger forever.
In the interest of time, we should move along, but maybe we'll take some of your calls on this during your turn. Ray and I will be doing that in a matter of moments. Bill, I want to ask you about Josh Hawley, our junior senator from the state of Missouri, who is cracking down, he hopes anyway, with Senator Blumenthal from New Jersey on Silicon Valley companies, which he says are addicting our kids, and they're really bad. I mean, I happen to agree that a lot of gaming companies and a lot of our online companies are addicting our kids. So I applaud Senator Hawley. How about you?
No, I just can't find it in me to applaud Senator Hawley. I mean, and I'm not a social media guy, and I think we're better served to stay off of it. But, I read that the senator was saying that, they're like luring kids from the Midwest to the coast. And I thought, here's a senator who went to Stanford and Yale, two great schools. And then when he wanted his first job, he went to D.C. I just don't trust Senator Hawley.
And if Google announced tomorrow they're moving to St. Louis, where does this bill go? In the trash can. This is just nonsense. This is some Hawley playing to the base nonsense. If you don't want your kids online, then patrol your kids and get them together. And what do conservatives always say? We need better parenting. The problem in the ghetto is their parents and all this. Well, ain't that true across America? This is just, I'm with you, Bill. I just can't get it.
Thank you.
He's also
You're
taking
more articulate.
what he's doing is he's jumping on an issue where the few issues I think people on the right have at least a fair argument, which is that Facebook and some of the others are going too far in silencing voices, whether they be on the right or the left. I think that's a slippery slope, and we ought to be very, very circumspect about doing that. Having said that, he did what they do all the time. Instead of just arguing that point, he had to make the point that Silicon Valley is evil and it's never contributed. Excuse me, Silicon Valley's contributed nothing to our society, really. I mean, I'm sorry, but our whole 90% of the technology we enjoy and take for granted as part of our lives comes out of Silicon Valley. It's not an evildoer's place.
But you know what? They do have engineers in Silicon Valley who design products to get you hooked, and they also send their kids to schools that are kind of like Luddites. They don't have any of this technology.
one
The
thing
very engineers at Google and Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere who are designing this for everybody else, they're keeping their kids away from it.
I do want to say,
Wait, and I bet you 99% of the people that ever worked in a cigarette factory as a CEO, their kids didn't smoke.
Of course.
I mean, an advertisement has always been designed to lure you, to hook you, drinking, smoking, partying, whatever. What else is new?
Holly does have one good point. The San Jose Sharks are in Silicon Valley.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Ray, because
They are in Silicon Valley. Maybe going there.
you might be,
There's a
with a
problem
minute
with
to
that.
go, you might be our biggest Blues fan at the table. I don't know. But we are going to take on the San Jose Sharks. And, of course, wisely, they again decided not to have their first game on a Thursday night. Wouldn't want to compete with us, right?
That was a league
It
decision.
didn't work for Friends, did it?
No,
that was
or
a league.
Seinfeld.
The league
They're
doesn't
off
do
the
much
air.
right. But
What do you
that was
think?
a decision.
What do you think? Are we going to beat
I
San
think we're
Jose?
going to beat them. And it's interesting. This is a rematch from 3 years ago
10
where we
seconds.
lost 4-2. And I think we have both teams are really improved over that. It's going to be a good series, and we're going to win it.
Alvin, you write sports for the American. What do you think?
We'll win the Stanley Cup because we put Bernie Federico on that wall right there. That's the one thing that has changed.
We didn't do that. He put himself up there.
Good
but he
point.
didn't.
You're absolutely right. Let's go
And
to
we're
the
glad he did.
mailbag and see what you had to say about last week's show. A Facebook conversation reminded me of the sponge Donnybrook for throwing at the television, an old pledge drive gift. I could use one now. Perhaps you should offer it again. Why not, Mary Garrett of St. Peter's? Ann Miller wrote us, there obviously has been some sort of nefarious power plan involved in the concept of Better Together. Let's hope Better Together finally fades away with the indictment of Stenger. Ms. Miller lives in the land of Alvin Reed, Kirkwood. You can write us care of KETC, 3655 Olive Street, 63108. Don't forget those emails, letters at ketc.org, or those tweets, hashtag DonnybrookSTL, and listen to us on the podcast on these social media sites like Apple and Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn. Thanks to Sarah Fenske for sitting in for Wendy Weiss, who returns next week. We sure appreciate you joining us, but don't touch that dial because Ray and I are going to take your calls next.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
We're back. Well, it's a kind of a mixed night. We're all excited about the Blues going forward and good things happen in St. Louis. But we are victims of the demise of Better Together because we lost 18 months of topics in one act.
It's true.
It's amazing. We were talking about how we would have been talking about it forever. Anyway, it's your turn. The provocateur, the big cheese, the boss man, Charlie Brennan, and I will be serving as water boy, Ray Hartman. Let us go to the telephones. To Clifford from Sunset Hills.
Gentlemen, another spirited evening in the commentaries. Very, very good.
Well, thank you.
This is about Better Together, and I had left a message for Tony Messenger. He did an autopsy of Better Together about 2 days before the Stegner story broke, and very good analysis. And as I mentioned to him, I don't know, it may rise again like the phoenix from the ashes, but perhaps it has been put to rest. I do think that there is a future for the Municipal League. I've been collecting signatures on a voluntary basis, and I can see why Better Together would never have won because I was getting signatures in opposition 26-1. So that tells you that story.
Wow.
26-1. That's a pretty good margin.
And since the city of St. Louis has over 100,000 properties that they own that could be demolished or renovated, Mr. Singfield might have taken his $25 million, donated it to the city for tear downs, because those bricks are sellable. Some of the best brick ever run through a kiln, and a lot of the best wood that comes out of those trusses. So there would have been a recouping of some of the money. And since they only allowed $1.7 million in the budget for tear downs, he could really help them out.
Thanks a lot, Clifford. Good
We
point.
appreciate the call, Clifford.
Yeah, and presumably he hasn't spent all that money yet, so maybe some of that largesse, which was earmarked for Better Together, could be used for that or some other purpose. Thanks.
Pulitzer Prize winner Tony Messenger did not get his Pulitzer for that, but he was right on the money in terms of a little bit ahead of Better Together's demise, predicting it was over.
Hey, let's go to Mario in North City. Hi, Mario.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Everybody. Yeah, I'll be real fast. You guys do a phenomenal job. I really appreciate you guys' input. I love St. Louis program like this. I just wanted to tell you about the Better Together. You know, I was a little skeptical about it too, because, you know, the city has the most stimulated economical development when it comes to new construction or renovation work. And with the TIF program, it is very helpful. In fact, you think about the last biggest project that ever went on in the county, every project for the past 10 years and more has really been in the city. I mean, you think about the NGA building that's already here, but everybody's stimming and buzzing about $1 billion construction job that throws that money back into the economy. I mean, I just wondered how that would play into the St. Louis County arena with the TIF fund, because when that was presented by myself and some other colleagues to the Charlie Dooley camp, they didn't really want to go, you know, they said unless they mimicked it like the city with the TIF type of deal, they wouldn't even be interested.
So you like the TIFs? Because you're talking to somebody that's not a big fan of the TIFs over here.
Well, I did find that unusual. You know, it wasn't quite a TIF, but they were taking the earnings tax from the employees at the National Geospatial Agency, and they're going to use that for the construction of this new facility. And they're moving it from, of course, near the brewery to up north. I just find it a little weird that a local government is subsidizing a national office building. To me, that seems weird.
Where are you talking about?
The National Geospatial Agency.
I don't think so. I mean,
has it ever happened before?
I'm sure it does. I mean, because one of the problems we face when you start talking about these economic development or tourism issues, particularly economic development, is we're not an island. I mean, and Charlie is the most idealistic guy I know about this, and it's great about not, and I happen to share in philosophically the idea of not providing corporate welfare. It's just a form of shifting taxpayers' resources to wealthy companies. But the fact is, as long as other states and other cities do it, a great example is Express Scripts, which is one of the best companies in St. Louis, and we're lucky to have them here. When we had there was a bidding war between our state and St. Louis County, when Jay Nixon and Charlie Dooley had the county with Pennsylvania and Bucks County. We won it, and it's a good thing we won it. I mean, you know, and you can not like it, but we were a whole lot better off with that other expansion of Express Scripts. I will grant you, Express Scripts is better than, let's say, a Costco or a Walmart, something like that, which are going to be built anyway. But don't forget when you do forgive taxes, whether the property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, that's less money you have to spend on children and courts, roads, bridges, whatever. Absolutely. Well, who's next? Why, I think it's Dave in Defiance. Hi, Dave. What's on your mind, Dave?
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, I got a question. And a comment. The question would be is, what does the city have to offer for the county? I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. And the city has such a list of issues that I don't know where it's going to benefit the county by combining them together. The only thing that I can see is that the county people, where they would help the city, is they could have more policemen from the city down there drawing chalk lines and laying out yellow tape around for all the crime areas.
Well, let me ask you. So you're in the county?
Defiance.
Oh, you're in Defiance.
I'm in the county.
Well, do Do you feel jealous that the city's got the Cardinals and the Blues and you folks in Defiance don't have them? I mean, you're as much a part of St. Louis as St. Louis City is my point. And I'd say it respectfully.
The reason I don't have a problem with the Cardinals and the Blues is I'm not going to go down there and pay $25 a park and walk a block away.
Okay. Well, a lot of people, but my point is this. You're as much a part of St. Louis as anybody else if you're in Defiance. And we need to get past this idea that it's okay to accept all the good things in the city. We all root together for the Blues and Cardinals. We don't need Better Together to bring us together for that. We're all fans of the cultural institutions, and the Grand Center area where we're broadcasting from has got wonderful, the Fox, the Symphony, the Sheldon, and public broadcasting. The point is, we need to recognize that, think about wherever it is you're living, what it would be like if none of the things that existed in the city were there.
And he's got the Daniel Boone home up there.
And the art. I mean, I think we need to.
Do we have some tweets to read? Do we pass those?
I think we might. Do we have?
We have tweets. Another
we have
caller.
Another caller.
Right.
Let's go to Bob in West County. Hi, Bob.
Hi. How are you doing this evening?
Good.
Hey, what I'm calling about is you were mentioning prison time for Sweeney and some of the other conspirators. And since money was such a driving issue for these people, I'm hoping the judges will put a substantial fine, possibly in lieu of a prison sentence. I would like to see some of that money recouped.
Well, in Steve Stanger's case, restitution is part of it. It would depend on the defendant and whether it's a great point. I mean, if a defendant is responsible, certainly if they received any money, generally a sentence is going to have that.
Well, they were
coming back,
or if they squandered public tax dollars.
And you have raised an interesting point. A lot of this is governed by guidelines and procedures that are in place already. But it's an interesting point.
Hey, let's get to some of the tweets, starting with this one from JDR 1949. Of course, Sheila Sweeney should go to prison. Bill is 100% correct that white-collar criminals get off too easily.
And from Daniel, is it Pate or Pate? Com, what happens to the lawsuits against the town opposing? I think that didn't help. Nobody likes a bully.
And we heard from Krista Taves. Better Together missed the most important area of cooperation, education. With multi-million-dollar facilities in West County and crumbling facilities and no money in North County and St. Louis City, we must have one school board with shared resources.
That's a really interesting
elephant in the room.
From Craig Riggins, any serious city and county merger plan would start with merging the school districts. Same point. That would address the lack of inclusion concern many people have. That's something that should be discussed immediately. That's interesting. 2 tweets in a row on that part.
Yeah.
Keep your tweets coming to hashtag DonnybrookSTL. And let's go to Gary from Webster Groves.
Hi, Gary.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. First of all, a question and a comment, please. Ray, did I hear you say that Miss Irby's new $121,000 salary was not a big deal or not excessive or something like that?
I did.
The 73-year-old woman just got a 400% raise. A lot of folks in St. Louis County would disagree with you on that.
Okay, but the county council position is a very part-time. That's not a fair comparison. I mean, you can compare it to
Agreed.
other. I think what they did, I'm not positive, but I'm guessing that Sam Page's office took a different position and took the money out of it, just shifted a position that was, in other words, didn't add to the county budget, but didn't fill a position that perhaps Steve Stenger had occupied.
Well,
I'm
guessing.
I don't have a name for you.
Okay.
I don't have a name for you, but I think that St. Louis County already had somebody in a position a whole lot like that.
They may have,
I think it was first a woman and then a man, and I don't have their names.
But my point is, I don't think they created a new budget for it. Is what I'm saying.
No, but my comment, please.
Sure.
I was really disappointed that the St. Louis County Council chose to appoint Mr. Page from within themselves. This is not the same situation as when Buzz Westfall died. This is a situation where faith in St. Louis County needs to be restored. And I would submit to you, and I know he's a Republican, and I know that wouldn't have worked, but they needed to find a Democrat who was above reproach from the outside, who was above reproach, and who didn't want to hold and keep the job. They needed to find a Jack Danforth kind of guy to come in and steady the ship until they could get an election set.
Okay, thanks for the call. I mean, that's a fair point. I think I'm a little skeptical, but I am ready and willing to give Dr. Page a chance, see how it goes.
Well, I am too. And I was critical, and so was Hazel Irby, interestingly, of the process last week that I thought was unnecessary. Now, you understand they have, by statute, the new county, the acting county executive had to be a Democrat.
Yeah.
Right? So, but I thought the process was wrong. But I will say this for Dr. Page. We didn't get to talk about it on the show, but a couple things he's already done is starting to renegotiate the Northwest Plaza deal with the Garners, calling for the state auditor to come in. He has done some things that are positive.
Good.
And so I think he should be given a chance.
Speaking of money,
I was very
Ray,
critical of the way this was handled.
And
Mark Mantovani
Page.
should have been given more consideration.
Well, think of Page, the pay decrease he's taken. I mean, if you're an anesthesiologist, you're probably making $500,000 a year. This is rank speculation. Right. I don't know. I haven't seen his W-2, but it's a lot more than, what's he making now, 140, 120? Hey, Daniel and Ladue, you're next.
How are you, gentlemen?
We're fine, thank you.
Great.
Well, I'm just calling in favor. I understand the county needs to be some faith restored, but I think the idea that Better Together is somehow ought to be mired down or penalized as a concept is really short-sighted of us as a region. We're 3 million strong and could be, depending on whose numbers you use, the 18th or the 9th largest MSA in the country if all of a sudden we can get our political groups to cooperate. And the voters are really getting the short end of the stick on this deal because as a region, you talk about our schools and education being necessary. Well, property values go up dramatically across the region, and that money does go directly to the school boards and the districts around the region if we can get out of the local dirty politics that have been bogging down this region for years and compete as, a significant regional player on a national stage in what everybody agrees is a global economy.
Sounds good.
Daniel, great point.
In theory, it's good, but don't forget the plan, which was put together by Steve Stenger and his attorney Bob Blitz and some others, would have put him in charge at first.
Yeah,
and that wouldn't have eliminated the dirty politics. In fact, it would have put the felon in charge. And so there were a lot of problems.
Of all the crow I've had to eat, I was publicly critical of that. I mean, that whole idea of the unelected, the thing in 2022 was ridiculous. One point, I think Daniel's making a great point, though. I think is what you make. We need to think as a region. And we've got to stop this thinking. The city, one of the objections I had to Better Together was the idea that this was regionalism. Keep in mind that based on the 2010 census, only 40% of the people defined as St. Louisans by the Census Bureau live in the city and county. More people who are St. Louisans officially live outside of the city plus the county than in it. And you know how much that's changed? In 1970, that number was in the low 80s. In other words, 82 to 85% of the region was defined by city and county residents, and it's down to less than 50. And that's the elephant in the room. We need to work through structures like East-West Gateway or whatever to fix that. But thank you, Daniel, for the call. And let's go to Joe from St. Louis.
Yeah, I'm just calling in response to the guy that said, what does the city have to offer opposed to the county? I'd like to know when the Rams are, well, not the Rams, but the Blues are playing, the Cardinals are playing, and the hotels are filled. They're filled in the county. The city offers a lot to the county, and the thought that the city is in such turmoil, that's just false.
Hey, thanks for the call, Joe. Do you mind if I tell our viewers who you are?
Oh, that's fine.
Joe Vaccaro, Alderman, City of St. Louis. I recognize that voice. Thanks for calling. Really appreciate it, Joe.
I think he has a great point.
Thank you.
But I totally agree, and we've got to get over this. I live in the county. I fought my way off the streets of Creve Coeur, but We have got to get over this, folks. We're one place. You know, we've got to understand that. And I did agree with Better Together on that point. It was the process and the details. But one place that includes St. Charles and Jefferson and St. Clair, Madison counties too. We've got to think of ourselves as one place, as we are. And I got to tell you, when we have that parade for the Stanley Cup, everybody's going to be from St. Louis.
Okay, who's next? Joanne Baldwin?
Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Yeah, this is Joe. Enjoy the show. First time calling in. And
Thank you for
just
that.
to be clear, this Joe is no alderman ever. No relation to any alderman.
It's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know it's probably not real popular right now, but you know, I'm going to stick my neck out there for Steve Stannard. I don't think he did anything too terrible. I think people are just quick to condemn him, and you know, I think as a good Christian man, I you know, want to look past his faults, and I think people are just quick to condemn him.
Thanks
That's
for the
a
call.
very nice
I will say, I always found Steve to be very friendly in person, and I thought he was a great speaker, and I feel bad that he may very well go to prison and not be with his wife and kids for some period of time. How long that is, I don't know, but I kind of feel bad for the man right now.
Let's go to Jim from Webster Groves.
Hi, I just want to say that the reaction to Better Together shows you could never underestimate the conservatism, the fear of change, the parochialism, and the inertia of the people of St. Louis. Everybody knows the place is decaying and has been for generations. Everybody knows something ought to be done. Nobody cares because they've got theirs in their little suburbs. And the way that these people have been vilified means that nobody's going to touch this subject or anything like it for another generation, which means more decline. And Charlie, when your kids get to be adults, you'll see, like my contemporaries' kids, that these kids are leaving town, and I don't blame them.
Could be. Now, that does happen all the time. You know, kids move out, and then now they move to places like Austin and Boston and Denver and Portland or whatever, but I moved here from Boston, and so there is some of that. People do, and always have, moved around the country. So there's that. But also, I do think, I agree with Ray. I mean, we are working together in many ways. The Community College District, the MSD, the East-West Gateway Council of Governments, the Zoo Museum District. Also, many of our police agencies are interconnected in many ways. So it's not like we're all in our parochial fiefdoms. And I wouldn't even call some great communities like Kirkwood and Webster Groves fiefdoms. I think they're great places to live. I think that there were structural problems with this proposal, and there are cities that are much more bifurcated than ours. Think of Minneapolis, St. Paul, 2 different cities, 2 different school districts, 2 different police departments, surrounded by 216 communities and probably 16 counties, and they're doing very well.
Right, and not only, let's be clear, not everybody vilified them personally. Dave Leipoltz, for example, who I interviewed, I pointed out was accessible and professional, and I don't think this was about good versus evil. The problems with Better Together, which we've talked about, were the lack of local, the fact that the state was going to impose governance against the will of the people. And also, my big problem was the really false expectations of savings that weren't going to happen. And there were issues that, but it wasn't about like, and I know there were a lot of people getting contracts, yada, yada, yada. To me, the problem with Better Together was not the intent necessarily of the people doing it. It was the candor of what was proposed and actually the practicality. And as I said, one last thing, it wasn't regionalism. And that's what we got. We can't, just fixing the city and county issues is not going to address the larger point about making us a competitive metropolitan area. And I'll stick to that point no matter what. Let's go to Dan in St. Louis. Hey, Dan.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I wanted to say that I was happy to see Better Together's ship sunk, at least momentarily. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've never understood is why there's been nothing said about why we have these different things in the first place. You know, we started all these things for a reason. All these people started these things for a reason, and we've never addressed those issues. I like the idea of a marriage, and to me it kind of says like, okay, we got a divorce. Now let's get back together. Let's not deal with the reasons we got a divorce in the first place. Let's just get back together. And then I had another suggestion. I wanted to suggest that maybe next week you guys could talk a little bit about the cameras in the old folks' homes and different things like that. Thank you very much for your time.
Maybe someday we will. I know that's a national issue now. And I don't think we have like cameras in nursing homes, but maybe one of these days. Good point.
Okay.
Chester and Chesterfield. Can that be possible? Hi, Chester.
Did they name the place for you?
It's a family name actually, but
okay.
Our whatever the word for that is, nickname. Minneapolis, St. Paul. Charlie, that Hennepin County and Ramsey County, two huge counties that got together and were way behind us back in the early 80s, and now they're laughing at us. I was always a peon, but I did, through my work, travel the entire country of the U.S., fortunately, and dealt with some people that dealt with these type of issues, and they have been laughing at us for years. We are not two large counties. Like if really what should happen here is Jeff County, St. Charles County, St. Louis and St. Louis County. To me, that's ridiculous, but let's say there's 4 counties or whatever. It all needs to come together, and I love the region. I agree with Mr. Hartman, in my senility, Ray. I agree with Ray. I'm not that old. I grew up in this.
There's treatment for that, but go ahead.
Or actually,
and what counties were you talking about?
Treatment for agreement.
The counties you were referring to, what municipal or metropolitan area are they in? Okay. I thought you were
with regard.
That was Minneapolis, St. Paul.
With regard to the Twin Cities,
Twin Cities.
You're talking Hennepin County and Ramsey County, two huge counties that got their act together back in the early 80s, and now they're knocking the,
They're doing well. I mean, they're doing well.
We appreciate the call. I'm sorry. And one of the things, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, but one of the things we can talk about is all the areas in the city that are doing well. I mean, the Grove, look at the Cortex,
South
Grand, Cherokee Street,
Central West End.
There's a lot of things that are happening that aren't all bad for those that are feeling. I really think there's a lot of excitement and in a lot of pockets of the city, and there's obviously some areas that are horrendously overrun with crime that have to be dealt with. It's a mix. I didn't mean to cut Chester out. I thought we were. Let's go to Mary from Kirkwood.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary. You there? Yeah.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm a long-term county resident. I'm in my 70s, and I'm against Better Together, but I think we need to give more respect, we as a community and area, to the national image of St. Louis City. The St. Louis image is Forest Park, Muni, the Arch, Cardinals, the airport, all of which is in the city. So we ought to quit disparaging the city.
Thank you.
That's it.
That was nice sentiment. Appreciate it.
Do we have time for Tom?
Sure.
Tom, you got about 30 seconds. Tom and Chester.
Yes, I would like to ask Sarah what we should do with people that have committed crimes. She didn't want them to go to jail, like I think it's Claire Sweeney. What should we do to punish those people?
Well, I can't speak for Sarah, but I think she's absolutely right in saying that as a country in general, we are looking to incarceration rather than other forms of, and a community service is one form of punishment that is available. And I think her general point, we can argue about white-collar crime and stuff, but her general point that we're incarcerating too many people, I think is a valid point.
In these floods that we're experiencing, you hear many communities are using prisoners to help sandbag. it sounds like it's slave labor, but to be honest, I bet you if I was in an 8x10 cell, I'd rather be out sandbagging than inside, honestly. I mean, there are probably more uses than that, don't you think?
I agree with you. Yeah. And we want to thank you all for the great calls tonight. And let's go Blues.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll just about be ready to sweep the series next Thursday. We'll see you Thursday night. Good night.